Back home, and you could almost hear the collective sigh of relief from Australian mortgage holders when the RBA decided to keep rates on hold on Tuesday. To talk us through the property market, REA Group economist Angus joins me now. Yes, it was a big day Tuesday. That's two in a row, Angus.
Yeah, good morning, Tim. Yes, look, certainly I imagine a lot of mortgage holders pretty pleased with yet another pause. And I think perhaps more importantly, it looks like we might be done with this hiking phase now from the RBA. We had RBA forecasts out yesterday, and on the back of that, it kind of looks like we might be through the end of this phase of interest rate increases. While the RBA is still expecting that inflation's going to be a problem and be too high and outside their target band for a while, back till mid 2025 is in their forecasts. They're now expecting a bit more of an economic slowdown than they perhaps were. And I think that's kind of persuading them that they may well have done enough on interest rates now.
It is extraordinary when you look at the property market, Angus. 1,900 homes. When I say extraordinary, we've seen all these rate rises and a lot of people are under a lot of pressure. But 1,900 homes are scheduled to be auctioned this week. It's winter. That's a huge amount when you think about where we're at and what we've seen.
Yeah, exactly right, Tim. It's going to be a pretty solid weekend for a winter weekend. Winter is typically a pretty quiet period in property markets. And, this weekend, look, it's not as busy as we were seeing in, say, March, which is, the peak of the autumn selling season. Very busy weekends back then. But it is still pretty solid for this time of year. And that's kind of consistent with what we're seeing more broadly at kind of conditions and what we're seeing in housing markets. Auction clearance rates have been pretty firm through winter. Again, they haven't been as good as what we were seeing in the autumn selling season, but they've still been bouncing around mid 60s in Sydney and Melbourne, which is still pretty good. We're also seeing, it is taking a bit longer to sell a home than it was, say, 18 months ago, but it's kind of been pretty stable over the last 3 or 4 months, and it's still faster than it was pre-pandemic. So, conditions are not maybe where they were 18 months ago before the RBA started raising interest rates, but they're still reasonably solid.
Now, PropTrack Home Price Index out last Tuesday. What are the findings?
Yeah, that's right. We had the PropTrack Home Price Index out, and what it showed was that the property price recovery continued again in July. Nationally, we saw prices up 0.2%. It's not a big increase, and it's a bit slower than we have been seeing through some months of this year, but it is still an increase, and property prices are still picking up. If we're looking across the cities, Sydney and Brisbane are continuing to post pretty solid recoveries, particularly Brisbane, actually, which is now prices are higher than they were at peak last year. So it's kind of fully recovered the downturn that it saw in 2022. Sydney's been growing relatively reasonably. We saw 0.3% in July. Again, a little bit slower than we had been seeing, but it's still a little ways off its peak from last year. In Melbourne, prices have been recovering a bit more slowly, and they were basically flat in July. So, continuing that kind of slow pace. But importantly, we're not seeing prices decline in Melbourne, which we were last year. So, there is a big change there.
Thanks, Angus. Good to chat. Have a good weekend.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tim.